I have so many thoughts on this, um, and trying to gather all of them. I realize I'm gonna try to do this unscripted and just ramble. So this is gonna be the incoherent rambling of a someone who, look, I don't know if I know enough to feel stupid, or if I don't know anything at all and I'm just stumbling over what little maybe I think I know, or a combination of the two. I'm not sure. Um, but from what I gather so far, is that gravity is nothing more than an acceleration force experienced against ambient space-time flow. So, if you would imagine yourself as, for instance, a leaf on the surface of a river, and the river is flowing, of course, and then suddenly you're in a leaf and you hit a rock in the middle of the river. Maybe it's sticking above the water surface and you hit a rock. Well, suddenly you go from feeling nothing, like if you were in free fall, jumping off an airplane, you're not being pushed or pulled, you're just following ambient space-time flow. You're not experiencing any acceleration because gravity is not inertial, which is why gravity is not a force. Um, but then, of course, suddenly, when you hit the ground, parachute or not, you experience a massive acceleration force that is retrograde to your following the ambient space-time flow. That's gravity. So yeah, the leaf is feeling no acceleration or deceleration in the ambient flow of the river, and suddenly hits a rock, and then suddenly it's bearing the weight of all that river water, uh, keeping it pinned against that rock. Um, that's what gravity is. That's all it is. If this chair I'm sitting on wasn't here, I would just follow ambient space-time flow and yeah, just fall downward. Um, but of course, there's only down when you have a force to orient yourself against, to judge direction and balance and things of that sort. Because life on Earth, we're not necessarily equipped to intuit the physics of space time without, of course, something physical to refer against to orient ourselves in that space time. If we were just, like, for instance, on Earth, it's constantly changing direction, not just tangentially. Well, I guess also, yeah, tangentially, but in several frames. Like the entire planet, of course, is orbiting the sun, and the entire solar system is orbiting the galactic center, and the entire galaxy is hurtling towards Andromeda, um, and we're here just chilling because of the inertial reference frame uh, of the planet versus you, me, right? Um, then again, gravity is not inertial, which is something I want to stress. It's not a force. Gravity is not a force. Gravity is a vernacular. Gravity is a colloquialism for the force you feel as you resist the ambient space-time flow bearing down upon you as you sit or stand, brace against the surface of the earth, or a chair or a bench, whatever it is. Um, that's all gravity is, because um, gravity is yeah, it's just acceleration force experienced against ambient space-time flow. Now, what is space-time flow? Why does space-time flow? That is another strange thing that maybe I'll stumble over my words to try to explain, because I've got my blackboard here that's full of scribbles and fourth-dimensional divergences, and just question marks everywhere, because this is about black holes, and black holes, like everything else in anything math, like anything like feedback loops, exponentials, asymptotic relationships, until something becomes undefined, you reach singularities in mathematics everywhere. And usually it's trivial. But in this case, we're dealing with a singularity that is actual. It's not just it's not just math doing weird stuff that code sometimes does, because language is code, math is language, math is a code that codifies phenomena and quantifies them. That's all language or understanding is putting it into bits, into quanta, and then either enlarging or diminishing the resolution of those given bits per unit of time to understand a thing, right? So it's usually singularity. Yeah, like x over zero is not impossible. It's just infinity. X over zero is infinity, um, and yeah, x over zero is infinity, and zero divided by anything is itself, because any quantity, imaginary, negative, positive, it doesn't matter, over nothing, because nothing isn't inherently positive or negative, over nothing is infinity. That is the most uncountable infinity that can exist, because there are regimes of infinity as well, and we can get into dimensional regimes as well. I'm rambling and I'm going way off topic. My ADD is taking control of me. So let me try to come back to foliation of spacetime. If I mentioned foliation before, I mentioned gravity is a vernacular. It's not a force. Electromagnetism and magnetism, that is a force, because that's entirely inertial, and that has to do with the properties of the matter. The space-time foliation has to do with properties of the matter, but only insofar as that matter has mass. That's it. That's the only requirement to foliate space-time. Whether in ambient, whether in antisymmetric space-time, or symmetric or isotropic space-time, which doesn't necessarily exist, because space-time is massless, and all non-isotropies in space-time will propagate infinitely. It's never completely isotropic. I mean, if space-time has no mass, and perhaps it doesn't even have a unit of distance that you can really measure it by, I'm just talking out my ass now. That's wild speculation. I haven't researched that. I'm thinking of like Planck lengths, because Max Planck, he successfully quantified distance, put it into specific quanta, but space-time without mass. I mean, bosons, of course, are massless. Photons, the EM spectrum, visible, non-visible. Bosons are massless, and we do math, and we up and down the resolution of those quanta per unit of time to understand things like, like the waveforms in the EM spectrum, and other phenomena. And spinors, apparent or non-apparent teleportation, thinking of things topologically. Bosons are very important, because they're just they're a placeholder quantification of something that can't inherently be quantified. Like in language, like there's so many words for love, so many ways to show love. What I think is the most powerful human emotion, right? So many ways to show and feel and all that stuff, and obviously the other person's interpretation and all that stuff. And in academia with math and trying to quantify things that aren't physical in and of themselves, but are the result of an interaction between something that is physical, and perhaps a lower or higher dimensional medium for propagation of information being involved there, like inherent teleportation with spinors and teleports and thinking of things topologically. But that's way off topic. Just foliation of space-time and mass energy density is really the important thing here. So gravity is nothing more than acceleration force experienced against ambient space-time flow. That's pretty simple. I think it's pretty intuitive. I think we can kind of wrap our heads around that pretty quickly. Now, foliation of space-time, why space-time flows, and this is where we get into black holes and singularities and the stuff that I find myself really struggling with. It's quite strange, because when you think of, well, perfectly Newtonian mechanics versus mechanics of the Einsteinian perspective, you'll see that they kind of yield exactly the same results until you start dealing, but they're fractionally off, and then you start dealing with the mass of celestial bodies, like the moon, for instance, or other planets, let alone our sun. You realize things like lensing happening, and Einstein's uh, not Einstein's greebling and framework and foundation for relativity, general relativity, gravity, and the folding of space time, that just yields far more accurate predictions of what we observe in the real world, like lensing of light, for instance, because light will always follow the cross section of whatever the space time whatever the shape the space time happens to be making at the moment, right? I mean, a photon will always travel in a straight line, but of course it can't travel if it doesn't have anything to travel through, and if you don't have existence, you can't exist. And space time is I don't know if I can like reach or pull this out of my ass, like space time is existence, but space time is the ether, to use a word that Tesla had had used in others of its time, the ether, right? This medium for propagation of information, and the most base of mediums is space-time. Within that, you have the Planck length, you have the Higgs field. Theoretically, that goes into why we think things have mass because of drag, in the Higgs field, and other really strange things. But I still haven't gotten to the meat and potatoes of this because I'm just rambling and this is unscripted. There's so many things. So mass energy density is a huge component to this whole relation of space-time. So, and mass energy density is really the decay factor that you can play with to either increase or decrease the eccentricity or fall off in the relation of space-time. And you can increase that eccentricity or increase that exponential, decay factor to such a degree where the fall off is such that the velocity of foliation of space-time is equal to the speed of light, either right at the surface of whatever object is folding a space-time or above the surface of whatever object is folding a space-time. And that is known as the Schwarzschild radius, or the event horizon, where it's like a space-time sonic boom almost. It's like a space-time light boom is what it is. I don't know if that's necessarily precise with the words, but the scribbles are pretty precise. The fourth-dimensional divergences of an antisymmetric second-rate tensor equals zero. Maxwell's equations for light, basically completely explaining that it's always light. Angle of incidence equals angle of reflection. That's really inherent teleportation, of course, because in real life things always travel in arcs, but light, of course, being a boson and never actually increasing or decreasing in its speed. Actually, you have things like optical density, which can increase the time it takes for a photon to travel through a medium, but the photon's actual speed never decreases or increases, changes at all. It's always c. It's always light, 300 million meters a second, right? Rounding up. But yeah, so the escape velocity of an object is the escape velocity of an object is dependent upon the object's energy density, that is folding the space space-time around it. So, of course, if I have a denser object, it will create a steeper fall off in that foliation of space-time. Now, there are really interesting things to think of here. You take the mass of Earth, for instance. You take that entire mass and you crush it down to the size of, I think it's a quarter or a golf ball, I don't remember exactly, but basically you shrink Earth down to the size of something that you can fit in the palm of your hand, give or take. It doesn't really matter because this is just for, right? We could do a 2gm over c squared and a Schwarzschild radius calculation if you wanted to know the exact diameter that the Earth would have to be to foliate space-time to the point where it is equal to the speed of light at or above the Earth's physical surface. Now, of course, there's like, well, do things still retain their physicality after you pass the event horizon? I don't know. There's something else I have to think of when explaining. It's not very intuitive in the language. I'm not being. This is not scripted. I'm not being perfect, and I think having you guys like get this. Because okay, so yeah, you take the Earth right now. Of course, at its surface right now, the Earth has we're experiencing was at 9.98 meters per second squared, 33 feet per second per second. That's what you're experiencing as acceleration force against ambient space-time flow. That's gravity. And of course, you can use that indirect measurement of the non-physical phenomena of space-time flow to calculate the rate of acceleration in a non-inertial reference frame. Right? If I free fall, and given a certain distance I free fall from, I know exactly the speed that I will reach before I hit the ground in that given height. Right? It's just math. We use indirect measurements to calculate specific things all the time. So then that's just one of them. You know, the resistance, the acceleration force against ambient space-time flow to calculate the acceleration to experience if you didn't have anything in your way to resist that given flow of space-time. Okay, so yeah, so you have the Earth and it's foliating space-time, and by the time you're at Earth's surface, it's only 1g, right? But if I were to keep Earth the same mass, and if I were to shrink it, well, suddenly, and if you were standing on the surface of the Earth as it was shrinking and its mass was locked, you would start to feel very, very heavy very quickly. First, it would be very gradual, but it is exponential, and you will have a feedback loop in that geometric commensurate increase in acceleration force you're going to experience against that space-time flow. Because space-time, you know, r squared and all that good stuff, or cubed if you want to be three-dimensional, there's fall-off and exponentials everywhere in all that is anything that exists, right? You know, transitional thresholds, peak transitional thresholds for energy, phase change, specific and latent heat, and things like refrigerants and all that good stuff. It's all exponentials, and it runs away. But the thing with space-time is that it not only runs away, but it doesn't have any such issue with actually reaching infinity. Space-time doesn't have any mass, so it is not bound by those limitations of mass. Space-time has no limit for capacitance of energy, in its ability to store it or discharge it. Now, how does space-time discharge energy? I'm talking out of my ass here. You know, I have to do more research to qualify or see if anybody's even like ADM Lagrangian. I don't know. On the top of my head, I'm not sure. I haven't really pieced it together yet, but I would think, based on what I understand, that that space-time discharges energy through through the existence of mass in it in the first place. There's a balance there that exists. Now, of course, like, okay, so let's go back to a black hole, right? You shrink Earth, you're on the surface of the Earth, and as the Earth decreases in size, in diameter, but maintains its mass, and you're on the surface as the Earth shrinks. At first, it's going to be chill. You're going to be like, okay, this is fine. And suddenly, not suddenly, but it's going to be gradual, but it's going to be gradual on an exponential, but inverse. So at first it'll be gradual, then it's going to be increasingly sudden, exponentially. So it's going to be fine until of course your spine disintegrates and then you're a puddle of biomatter on the surface of the Earth, and all the mountains crush, and then Earth becomes perfectly smooth, and then suddenly it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until the point where it is to the size where it can fit in the palm of your hand. And then the light boom happens. Then suddenly the Earth is so small, given its mass, its energy density is so high that space-time, the space-time that it is foliating, is allowed to reach the speed of light either right at or above the surface of the Earth. That's what's happening, because as the Earth shrinks and maintains its mass, it's foliating space-time more and more and more. Think about it like this. If I were to jump off a plane right now, and I'm falling towards the Earth, but as I'm falling towards the Earth is shrinking faster than I can fall towards it, I'm also going to accelerate on an exponential, because as the Earth shrinks, I'm going to pass the point where I would have hit the ground as the Earth shrinks ahead of me, if you understand what I'm saying. And then it gets to the point where, of course, because that space-time foliation is exponential, and I'm accelerating exponentially, because the energy density is increasing and increasing and increasing, and that fall-off is becoming increasingly eccentric. I'm accelerating non-inertially. I'm not feeling anything. I'm accelerating non-inertially, because that's what space-time is. It's non-inertial. It's not what it is, but that's what it does. It has non-inertial acceleration and things like that. Anyway, because gravity's not a force. Man in a room with a rocket strapped to it and all that, and then the guy falling off the roof, not feeling anything. Einstein's thought experiments, and it's actually, gravity's very well understood, I guess, but it's still very stimulating to think about. So yeah, if the Earth is shrinking faster than I can fall towards it, it's going to get to the point where I'm going to pass myself that point of no return. The planet, of course, is going to fall beneath that point of no return, and then, of course, I'm going to see the planet completely disappear. In fact, I'm going to cease to see anything. Maybe there would be things like a Doppler effect for red and blue shift, depending on my angle, because the Earth is not a completely zero velocity or angular momentum. It has angular momentum, and it has rotation. Earth will be a Kerr black hole because it has rotation. It would create a torsion in the foliation as well. It wouldn't be completely symmetric. It would be a torsion in the foliation, and it would create. Well, that's just another way of saying it would frame drag, and things like that. Just like how an airplane. Think of anything traveling through any medium, right? An airplane traveling through the sky at subsonic velocity is pretty chill, pretty normal. But of course, once the airplane breaks the sound barrier, whatever humidity or altitude you're dealing with, let's just say the speed of sound is 730 miles an hour, give or take, depending on sea level, humidity, blah blah blah. But anyway, just that number, sure, 700-ish miles an hour. Once the plane passes that point, the extremes of what it had to fight all the way up till breaking the sound barrier are just reached that peak transitional threshold and become just an entirely new regime of absurd. Where, for instance, as anything travels through a medium and it's displacing the things in the medium that make up that medium, it's going to create a lower concentration. Um, it's going to create a negative space that trails behind it as it travels through the medium. It's going to punch a hole through whatever medium it's going through. Of course, if aerodynamics, we try to minimize that sort of thing with having blunter front edges. Sometimes, like in a space shuttle, it has a blunt nose because it's trying to push away the bow shock of going at like Mach 24 into the Earth's atmosphere. It being blunter creates that farther away bow shock. Where if you had a pointier front end, the actual shock wave that is like the equalization pressure barrier between the high density air that you're punching through and the low density air, just the gradient, the ratio between compression and just the pressure gradient is so extreme. But that's one cool thing. That was another tangent. Anyway, it's not the same thing. Intuitively, though, you can make some. You can kind of ground yourself with the intuition involved there, where an aircraft traveling supersonic with that extreme pressure gradient, having to constantly fight that extreme, all the forces acting upon it, the atmosphere constantly trying to equalize itself across that extreme gradient, and obviously the more extreme things are, because of how all laws of physics work, the more rapid the transition between those extremes become. And of course, the rapidity of those extremes, the amount of energy exchanged in a small amount of time, that can lead to other things too, like what powers our star, fusion, for instance, pressure and all that really cool stuff. That kind of just runs away and creates this delicately balanced system to where it's got incredible gradient in such a small window, and you have so much, such incredible energies just going between those two extremes, and then if it becomes imbalanced, then suddenly one extreme wins over the other, and then our star is not large enough, but star that certainly is like VY Canis Majoris. It's a massive diameter. When it goes, it's going to go supernova, because of how equilibrium and all that stuff works. But it's all about balance. And same thing. I'm trying to draw some intuitive analog to the event horizon of an object. I say of an object, which is weird. Just try to. It's really the event horizon is like a light sonic boom. It's a visual, and that's kind of ironic to say it's a visual thing. It's not. It's really the absence of all things that can be seen, which of course you can see in the presence of things, right? You can see a black hole inside of an accretion disk that's around it. If your eyes could somehow resolve that much light and not completely evaporate your entire body trying to look at it because it would be so bright. Not like you would evaporate your body, but you would definitely go blind if you tried to look at a black hole's accretion disk. That's probably I think what is it, quasars or magnetars? Are magnetars the neutron? Quasars, though, I think are the brightest objects in the universe. Aside from the universe's creation itself, theoretically. The Big Bang is another singularity in astrophysics, but of course, a singularity of a different kind. Not really it is sort of a mathematical singularity, but not one that we could really confirm that it's physical. We can only intuit based off of You know, how we can flip our scribbles now and go back in time and see, well, maybe this happened or whatever. I don't know. But we have observed the event horizon of objects that are active Schwarzschild radii in real life. Black holes exist, and they're very cool. They're fascinating. They're terrifying. Um, and I want to know more. What really? But yeah, so it's like equalization gradient. That like if you've seen an aircraft break the sound barrier in a very humid area of the atmosphere, you will see the conical. You'll see the vapor. Well, actually, you'll see the humidity in the air condense quite rapidly right against that pressure barrier that the aircraft is creating. Because of course, when you have rapid steep fall offs in pressure gradient, of course you drop in temperature because there's less stuff there. There's less stuff, less energy, less mass concentrated there. And so, because things like equalize, the water vapor is like, holy shit, like there's not as much of anything here. Well, I'm gonna have to go down an energy state now and collect and become denser and all that stuff, and then you see it rapidly propagate across that pressure barrier, right behind it, because you have the high pressure, and then you have that, I forget the exact, I think it's 6 degrees is the shock wave or something around there at Mach 1, that takes shape, and it's in a cone, of course, around the cross section of the aircraft. It forms at the tips in the fuselage. And yeah, the water vapor, the humidity just condenses into very visible form that fills in that silhouette of the shock wave. And of course, other cool things too happen. Like, if you've ever seen anything like on a hot day, the pavement of the highway or the road or whatever, are radiating heat, and you can see how the heat affects the way light passes through it, because you have differences in the optical density happening there. So you can see heat because of how optical density works and the way it's hitting your eyes. And you can see the shock wave of the sound barrier because of how concentration gradients of energy work and equalization works, and the humidity in the air going, hey, we're really low pressure here, I'm going to cool down and become really dense now, kind of thing. So yeah, and same thing with the event horizon of a singularity, where the event horizon of a singularity is a visual representation of space-time traveling at the speed of light.